Okay, so I had a chance to observe your word work lesson, and as you reflected back over, how did you feel that the lesson went?
So I think it was more challenging than I thought it would be, for sure. So they definitely had background knowledge regarding what a prefix is and a suffix is in a root word. And I think I kind of underestimated the background knowledge that they might have had. Or no, I did not expect that they didn't have the background knowledge regarding the meaning of certain common prefixes and suffixes. And so that made it a little more difficult. And I did provide the support of a couple different charts that had the meaning so they could refer to it when trying to determine the meaning of these words. But I think it was a little bit more difficult than I had expected in that way. I think the graphic organizer did help in terms of being able to break apart the word into parts and think closely and analyze, okay, what's the meaning of the prefix, what's the meaning of the root word. But sometimes they just really did not know the meaning of the prefix. And so that did make it a little difficult when it came time to applying that analysis of the word parts to, the ultimate goal of finding the meaning of the word. But I think I tried to scaffold and give them support to get through it, and let's really think, what other words do we know that have this prefix? Let's think of their meanings to kind of help, reach the goal of determining the meaning. And so it was more difficult than I had expected it to be, but I think they understood the purpose behind it. So even though they had trouble finding the meaning of the words, they now know, okay, when I come across an unknown word, not only can I use context clues, but I can also use these word parts to help me determine the meaning. So in that way, they understood the process and the purpose behind it, even though the actual application was a little tricky for them.
Okay.
So
they understood the purpose, but with that lack of background knowledge of the common prefixes and suffixes, that made it more difficult. So knowing that, and you did provide those supports of the charts and the graphic organizer. So even though they still did have difficulty with that, can you think, moving forward, what you might change or what you might do differently in terms of those, prefixes and suffixes?
Yeah, so what I actually had done the next day was I went back and found just more of the common prefixes and suffixes that I was more confident they had definitely seen and they could definitely use to practice the act of applying the analysis of word parts to determining the meaning of unknown words. And so I had the magnetic pieces, and so they were able to kind of manipulate the words and in a more engaging way, I guess, as well, as opposed to just using graphic organizer. And it was just a bit more, it was just more on their level. And definitely they were able to really use their background knowledge in a better way, because they did have background knowledge of these prefixes and suffixes. And so in terms of being able to support them in that way, I think that was more helpful. And I kind of gave them okay, let's try to build as many words as you can and find the meaning of as many words as you can using the word parts. And yeah, it was definitely a nice follow-up too.
So kind of going backwards and picking out specific ones that you knew they would have success with?
Right, yeah, exactly. I wanted them to feel more successful, and I wanted them to just have more practice with the skill of using word parts to determine the meaning. So I think that was accomplished in that second day.
And then during the lesson, I noticed when you saw them struggling with the word parts, I noticed that you encouraged them to utilize the skills of context clues that they had used from the previous lesson.
And so that was totally not planned, but I think it was helpful that I was okay, well, we are having trouble, but when we're reading, words don't come in isolation, so this is why it's good to have both, and to be good readers, use context clues and word parts together to help them. And so that's when I provided them the sentences, and I think that was helpful for them to come to that realization. We have to use all, both parts, and so that was kind of a helpful piece.
Showing them that skills just can't be used in isolation. So you can't just use word parts and suffixes.
Yeah, so that was good.
Okay, so I took some data for you. So I timed the guided practice and then the independent practice. And I broke it down into, it's an average, like teacher talk,
Yeah.
student talk, and then there was times where nobody was talking because you were giving them wait time,
right.
and then I like made it into a little chart
Oh my
like we
gosh,
talked about.
that's so great. Thank
so
you.
take a second to look over that.
Awesome.
So as you look over it, is there anything that stands out in terms of the goals we talked about? Because I know you really wanted to work on like watching your talk during that modeling and that independent time.
I definitely still, I mean, my talking should, and I do see that the teacher talk did go down from guided practice to independent practice, which I think does make sense, but I still need to work on improving that because I do want the student talk time to increase, especially, during guided and independent practice. Like, I feel like they should be talking more than I am.
Okay.
Like, I think it should obviously go, teacher talk mostly during modeling, and then less and less, gradual release.
Right.
So that's something that I'm definitely going to continue to work on. It's still a goal of mine. I don't know, I jump in and I want to provide support, and I think this lesson, I kind of had to, in a way, because it was difficult for them, but I think it's still important that they come to these realizations on their own and take ownership of their learning, even when it's difficult. Just giving them that appropriate amount of scaffolding. And I think too much talking is, not the appropriate amount. And so I'll have to definitely, consider that more going forward.
Right. And like you said, it was more challenging than you had thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
So I think, you probably, and like you said, you had to talk a little bit more to provide that support for them. But I guess moving forward, how do you think you can take this data in terms of that your goal is to decrease your teacher talk time?
I'm just going to have to really be more cognizant and just be like, okay, I'm going to just let you guys, or turn and talk, go discuss with one another, or doing more open-ended questions where they have the space to just express their thinking, and even using more wait time. I am glad that my wait time was there for sure, and definitely balanced with the student talk. Giving them the wait time was pretty important, but I think just being more aware, just covering my mouth and saying, okay, I'm gonna wait for you to talk and listen, and because there's the two of them, I think I definitely need to use that and have them have that time to share and discuss. I definitely need to incorporate that more. So I think that's what I'll try to do going forward.
Okay, so just, and so you said you're going to have them utilize the pair together to have them talk a little bit more to help you decrease the time that you're talking, and then just staying cognizant of, giving them that wait time and, okay.
Yeah, the space to really just talk about what it is we're learning and the process, and so.
Yeah, okay. So, as you plan for future lessons, do you have any new ideas that you might, based on the goals from this lesson? So, we talked about to decrease the teacher talk time, but then in terms of the goal that you had for them with being able to, find the meaning of unknown words with those word parts.
So going forward, I think we're gonna transition from the explicit or the word study lessons to using what we learned in context during comprehension and reading. So just kind of remember, when you read, I want you to be thinking about unknown words and stopping to find the meaning of the unknown words and not just skipping over it. And we can use context clues and word parts. And I think when I conference with them individually while they're reading independently, I think that could be a good time to kind of ask those open-ended questions did you come across a word you don't know? And what did you do? And just very open, just tell me something that you did or what was the thought process? Tell me about your thinking when you came across an unknown word. And giving them just that time and the wait time to come to their realizations of what did I do? Did I stop? Did I not stop when it was an unknown word? And So that's, I think, going forward where I'll kind of pull that into play and practice the things we talked about in terms of giving them that time to share and talk and use the strategy that you learned.
I understand that, yeah. And I think, like we've talked about a lot in class, like it's more beneficial to practice these skills in an authentic way. So doing it in that reading for meaning section.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's all I have.
All right, great. Thank you.